I'm one of the worst generalists at Cisco. I'm supposedly the CTO for service providers in Europe, so I touch with service providers, infrastructure, video, mobility, and cloud. It's a little bit of everything and nothing really serious. One of the things we keep on seeing happening out there is that this problem of traffic growing on wireline networks about 30–40% year on year, on mobile networks on average 80–90% year on year is not going away. And video, I was happy yesterday when I heard from Hitchcock, the CIO of Vodafone. They now see 60% of their mobile data traffic being video. This is what we predicted 2 or 3 years ago. So we were not completely off track. And it's a combination, of course, of different sources. Of course, it's over-the-top player. We discussed at some length about them. It's broadcasters putting their content online, looking at broadband as another distribution channel. It's definitely the proliferation of direct-to-consumer electronic devices. One of the key issues I'm dealing with service providers these days is, on one side, in front of this booming traffic, how to keep the unit production cost decreasing at a pace of 30–40% year on year, or say 20–30% is probably a more realistic figure. And that comes from, of course, simplifying the network, delayering the network, but also embedding content distribution networking assets in the network itself. The other question is quite often how to take a slice of the value created end-to-end between over-the-top players and consumers, how to participate into the value chain. And one of the more sophisticated discussions is how to create vertical packages for broadcasters and digital media over and above video contribution and distribution to allow them to distribute their content over broadband with a vertical managed service. When you think about what Sky is doing in terms of their distribution on iPad, when you think about the iPlayer model, I think there is a space in the broadcaster arena to take CDN as an example, together with quality of service enabled transport, and package this in a verticalized way for the digital media and broadcaster industry. Now, in my discussions with many of your peers, and some of you directly, about CDN, yes or no, I normally face 3 different answers. One is, well, let's throw cheaper and more bandwidth at the problem, because we need to have the unit production cost per bandwidth decreasing 20–30% year on year, and use CDN ad hoc. So in areas where we can optimize traffic, we will use CDN. The other one is we let CDN from third-party players come into our assets. I mean, when Google is coming and knocking at the service provider door and saying, I can position a cache engine in your rack at the point of presence, and you get a relief from all this traffic. I mean, they're not stupid, right? They do it for a reason. I think there is a business case which is probably stronger than what most of our peers are analyzing. And the third model is we should bring CDN assets back into our network. What is the business case about it? The economics of CDN, there was a CDN World Summit last week, are really, really challenging. You've seen the cost per gigabyte per month, the price per gigabyte per month decreasing to less than 1 cent of a dollar in terms of large volume. And the margin is very much a transport style type of margin. So this business requires scales. It's not a business where we go and deal with an in-country service provider or a local city carrier. And there is a temptation quite often to build up a CDN, but without scale, there is no viable business case. I mean, it's very similar to a transport business where we optimize content and we need to scale massively. So one of the ideas is how can we reach scale by federating content distribution networking with one another. And federation is a little bit more complex than just interconnecting CDNs. Interconnecting them is, of course, the first step. The second step is how do we transfer or how do we expose capabilities from one CDN to another. So at the point of interconnect, there was a very good comment on the session before, right? We had differentiated services analysis about 15 years ago on how to enable quality of service traffic from one carrier to another. There is still not a clear standard. So I think on the CDN arena, we should avoid the same mistake. I think we should define how we expose capability from one CDN domain to another one and move straight to standardization bodies. And then there is also the notion of who is dealing with. We may have the classical M-square type of problem where we start federating any to any, Or we may start having the notion of a CDN exchange where actually there is value for wholesale provider to provide not only the CDN federation, but also an exchange that allows to simplify the complexity of the federation model itself. So with the notion of CDN federation, the objective of a trial that we just completed in phase 1 and will continue in phase 2 with many more players is on one side to understand the technical capabilities required for CDN federation. On the other side is to simplify also the contracting aspect with content providers. Once I federate and I can present a scale which goes well above the borders of my country or my footprint, what is the contractual power I do have with respect to service providers? And then what else can I build on top of that? Of course, the name of the game here is definitely not that of bringing our CDN play on par with that of an established player like Akamai or Limelight, right? If that's the name of the game, it's a catch-up, it's a Me Too play. I don't think is where we create value. So I think the logic is once we have the scale and once we have a way of doing consistent way of moving the workload from one CDN to another is where do we get the additional source of revenues? Let me skip the slide. The additional source of revenues come from granularity of information. We can start having metadata analysis and metadata parsing to understand behavior and map behavior to user analytics. We can use the network itself and the embedded capabilities of the network to do multi-screen delivery. Transcoding, transrating, having ABR encoding into the network itself. We can trigger quality of service from the CDN. So there are elements of value that we try to capture that will create a better business case than just federating content distribution networks in order to just cope with a peer-to-peer competition with the like of Akamai. IBSG, which is the consulting arm of Cisco, tried to model this, and I'm sorry for the size of the font here, but basically when you try to simplify this chart, you will see that on the current trajectory, which is probably a combination of playing with the like of the established CDN vendor and having some of the on-net isolated CDN asset into the NGN, and you compare with a almost fully federated infrastructure, you will see a higher growth of video-related services, creating value, but also higher growth here in orange of what we call value-added services on CDN. And these are explicitly transcoding, transrating, triggering quality of service, ad insertion, and business analytics. So that becomes a platform for value creation and not only for cost optimization. I think the other interesting side effect of that on cloud is that when we think cloud today and cloud end-to-end, to me that's an oxymoron, right? Cloud end-to-end today is an oxymoron. It's a contradiction in term. There is no end-to-end cloud today because there is still a missing link between the data center component of cloud and the network component of cloud. And we have seen several examples earlier today of what does it take to create an end-to-end SLA on cloud. The other key issue, and the European Commission is very active there, is the notion of within the cloud domain, how do we implement cloud interconnect and data portability from one cloud to another. When you look at the CDN federation, in reality, CDN federation is built on a tighter integration of the cloud, in this case a video cloud, with the network. It's based on the notion of standard interoperability of video clouds and data portability. So we create a framework that I think could be reused also to address many of the cloud aspects we discussed earlier today and yesterday, and some of them, including data portability and interconnect, are very high also on the regulatory agenda. The pilot itself, which was officially presented at the CDN World Congress about a couple of weeks ago, so British Telecom, Telecom Italia, Orange, and KDDI, and SFR as the partners. It had a business track and a technology track. So what are the technical implications in terms of exposing services? What are the business implications in terms of the new negotiating power of a federated CDN? And what are the value-added services that can be built on top of that? The next phase, we'll see more participants, and we'll see how we can cross-pollinate some of the elements that we're learning from CDN Federation into a broader set of cloud-related items, like interconnect, data portability, and quality of service across clouds. So that's me presenting the notion of CDN federation. I hope this will give a couple of trigger elements for a fruitful discussion, and thanks for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you. Can we say thanks to Paolo? Thank you very much.